Pretty tough acts to follow, HG and all the rest, Jeremy, and I've just got some very sincere reminiscences about Greedy and early days. It's obvious from the praise and affection that Greedy was a much-loved and unique individual, a huge talent with a huge heart. Funny, he loved performing, exuberant, funny, a larger-than-life presence. When I had to pull out through ill health, I was confident Greedy could keep the ship afloat, which he did effortlessly. We called each other often. Typically, he was more concerned with my health than his own. Although we attended the same campus at East Sydney, I didn't meet Greedy until an early incarnation of Mental as Anything got a gig on Monday nights at the Unicorn Hotel. Greedy would turn up in his big Stetson and jam away on the harmonica, blues harp, whatever you want to call it. He was great at it. When it became obvious that he wasn't going away, one day I said to him, "Let's get you a Farfisa organ." He was keen, and we found one in the Herald Classifieds, as you did in those days. We drove out in my little Beetle and met a sweet little Italian man who reluctantly sold us his cherished organ for about $300. The rest is history. We could now play I'm a Believer just like the Monkees. Apart from growing up a few miles from each other in leafy Roseville, there was another strange connection. My mother was in a convent boarding school in Maitland near Newcastle. Our mothers were about the same age, both having piano lessons at the convent. They may have literally bumped into each other. Greedy and I often talked about these weird connections. We spoke recently on the phone. He said that it was odd that a young Protestant girl was taking lessons at the convent. I texted him, I guess the nuns had to pay for their habits. Greedy replied, "Touché, boom boom." That was the last text I received from him. I won't delete it. Rest in peace, Greedy. We all loved you.
This is my colour. I only wear black and white clothes, but I manage some colour. I will always remember Greedy as the most cheerful and positive person I have ever met. No matter how dire or disappointing the situation, he would always find the bright side. He was a very funny man and would often have us in stitches, both on stage and off. I think he enjoyed cracking the band up with his onstage antics and semi-abstract stream of consciousness spiels, to the point where we were missing cues and buggering up tricky chords. This has been covered slightly, but I must confess to the dubious distinction of giving Greedy his name, much to the irritation of his ex-wife and mother and my wife, who both insisted on calling him Andrew. Who all insisted on calling him Andrew, sorry. We were playing at an afternoon art student party in Darlinghurst, and our payment was a slab of beer and a family-sized bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. He ate 15 pieces of the chicken and had earlier consumed a hamburger, a milkshake and several cans of VB. So that is how Greedy earned his name. Greedy was a great entertainer and a gifted songwriter, and also a very good musician. He diligently mastered the technical intricacies of the early drum machines, 4-track tape recorders, and complicated computerised keyboards like the Fairlight. He was a competent keyboard player and could always come up with a catchy keyboard part, but I think people sometimes overlooked his skill as a harmonica player. He could play great blues harp, but was also a master of the more demanding chromatic harmonica. Check out the chromatic flourishes on Too Many Times. Greedy was very smart, widely read and well informed. He could make an intelligent observation on just about any topic. He was a master of cryptic crosswords, which I have always found completely baffling. He was also across the arcane contractual aspects of the music industry. Peter Bird and I would often foolishly smoke a huge joint before a band meeting, so we wouldn't really have a clue what was going on. But fortunately for us, Greedy, Martin and our manager Jeremy Fabini paid more attention and probably inoculated the mentals from being ripped off by unscrupulous record companies and promoters. We had a shared interest in non-fiction book reading and would discuss and recommend books to each other. I will miss these conversations about the latest boring history or science book we had discovered, and I will miss being bamboozled by his complicated explanations of contractual arrangements he was pursuing for the mentals. We will all miss the company of this funny, kind, generous and decent man. Rest in peace, Andrew Greedy Smith. Thank you.
Now I can see. I first met Greedy somewhere around about 1976, could have been 77. He was at East Sydney Tech, better known now as the National Art School. He and I were hanging around a bunch of rat bags, a four-piece, slapped-together art school band who were playing parties and little gigs around Darlinghurst in the inner city. Greedy was an art student too. I wasn't. I was just Reg's little brother, still in high school in 1976. But both of us would sort of hang with the band. We would sit in sometimes and jam with them. Greedy couldn't always make it. Sometimes he was working at the Chatswood Charles Botlow, as we heard before. At about that time, that Greedy, who was still Andrew in those days, became a permanent fixture with the band. Somewhere around, I think we've heard 1977 on Elvis's anniversary of his death. It was we always used that as the time that the five of us came together: Andrew, Greedy, Bird, me, and Reg. We stayed together for 22 years. The original bass player was Steve Coburn. He took off for a holiday for 2 weeks, so I just filled in. 22 years later, still hadn't come back. Greedy was lively and friendly, and he wore cowboy hats and cowboy shirts, and he wore a harmonica belt with room for 12 harmonicas to play for every single key, which was pretty funny because we only played in about 3 keys. He did play great harmonica though, and he brought a love of country and rockabilly to our sound with a boundless energy, which I think we all had because we were just young in those days. Look, you look back at the old clips and the videos and everything looks like it's just been sped up. We're all going frenetically and frantically. We were playing every song super fast, but they sound all right. We play them now and they were much, much slower. I lived in a share flat in Coogee around that time. A lot of people came and went. Greedy's brother Stuart moved in for a while and then Greedy moved in. He was very easy to live in. We loved our record player. That was a Thorn player, in fact, in those days. We listened to modern sounds in country and western music by Ray Charles, Willie Nelson's Stardust, Nina Simone's My Baby Just Cares For Me, Leon Russell's Hank's Back, Aretha Franklin's I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, Julie London, Wilson Pickett, Burt Camford, Motown, Stax, reggae. Sometimes we'd even listen to New Wave or punk. Well, some of that stuff did come into our music. In fact, I think we were just sort of taking it all in and learning by osmosis. And that was about the time that Greedy did get that Farfisa organ to make the sound a bit more fancy. He would play with 2 fingers, which was perfect because you can hear it on Nips Are Getting Bigger. Eventually, he did actually add another finger or 2, and that was on one hand. Later on, he sort of get the left hand going too, but we tried to sort of dissuade him from doing that too much. Too fancy. I can see him at the Civic Hotel wearing a woman's paisley pantsuit, talking gobbledygook to the audience, making use of the organ as somewhere to rest his ashtray. He'd have a couple of lit cigarettes in the ashtray, one in his hand, had a glass of something in the other hand, and be playing and singing, and have the harmonica going. Somehow he could get it all going, and then he'd light another cigarette up while he was doing that. A lot of people have been saying what a decent bloke Greedy was, how kind he was, respectful, genuine and caring, and that's all very, very true. Being in a band together for all those years, you bond and become a family. We did thousands of gigs, hundreds of thousands of kilometres travelling in cars and trains and planes and backstage and motel rooms at Winnebago. We'd drink and eat together, joke around. We spent so much time that you can drive each other nuts. Greedy would actually wear you down with his relentless cheerfulness. He was stubbornly buoyant, infuriatingly upbeat, which could turn him into the butt of practical jokes at times. And if your fuse became too short, he was always the one to unleash on. I suppose I should tell you the prank that we pulled on him once in New Zealand. We all shared motel rooms. I think Martin was in with Greedy. He took Greedy's oversized duty-free bottle of Glenfiddich that he'd bought at the airport and decanted it into another bottle, hid it away and replaced the whiskey with cold tea, which looked pretty much the same colour. After the gig, Greedy went back to the room. He wasn't going to party that night and he was in bed reading a book. So we all invited ourselves up to his room to have a wee nip. He got into bed early, so we said, "Oh, Greedy, can we just have a little nip? You've already opened the bottle." So he relented. He was a very nice fellow. And so we started pouring huge glasses almost to the top and pretending to talk. And as we were doing that, one at a time, one of us would slip into the bathroom and tip it away and come back and refill the glass. The bottle was going down quite low and Greedy was thinking, I better have some of that too. So he stopped reading his book, put it down, took a little sip of the whiskey and then sort of paused for a few seconds and looked up and his sort of face just started flushing and going really, really red. His eyes were furious and he bolted out of the bed and we all just went out of the room towards the door. Unfortunately, I got trapped between the door and Greedy. And he's quite a big fellow, much bigger than me. So he grabbed me and he upended me onto the ground. And once my fingernail broke and I saw blood, I thought, I've got to get out of here. This fellow's dangerous. So we spent the rest of the night back in our room ringing up his room to see how he was. He just hang up every time. We kept that up for about an hour. So you can see how mean we could all be. One of Greedy's friends was Diana O'Neill, who used to work for Regular Records in those days. We've talked about her before. I said something to her the other day about how the good die young. And she said, yeah, and only the arseholes are left. To balance things out, she also said how much Greedy loved her mum's salmon rissoles. Greedy loved food, hence the name. So at that gig that we did that time, I think we've heard that story. I was going to tell it again, but he ate 15 pieces. I actually think it was 16 pieces. And we played a gig that night. We were often doing like doubles and playing as much as we possibly could, and the hamburgers that they were making were very nice, but we couldn't eat any of them except for Greedy. In the mid-'80s, a group of young women started showing up at the front of the stage at almost every show the Mentals played around the Sydney area. When I left the band in 1999, they were still there at the foot of the stage. And I think they've been sort of continuing for the next 20 years since I left the band, still there at the front of the stage. You might call them dedicated fans. Though one of them came from Camden, we knew them as the Newcastle girls. Narelle, Janelle, Alison, Sue and Jenny. And we'd always talk to them after the gig. I noticed on Facebook the other day that Narelle had posted this about Greedy. He was the most beautiful, compassionate, non-judgmental, fun, loving, caring, effervescent, creative, quirky, talented, genuine, gentle soul. Just over the top, isn't it? It's not the sort of thing that any of us in the band would actually say. But it's a testament to the sort of person he was and the effect he had on people and the time that he gave to them. I really can't remember him saying a bad word about anyone, and if he did, it was done with bugger all malice. Circumstance threw us all together and we were the sum of our parts. We could send ourselves up, but we were deadly serious about the music. Writing songs, recording and playing meant everything to us and to Greedy. He never changed. Any measure of success or fame didn't alter him one bit. He loved his fiancée Fiona, his brother Stuart, his son Harvey, his family, his music, people in general, writing songs and performing. We've lost a brother.